All right. Welcome in, everybody. I'm so glad that you are here. This is August. We're in the month of August for 2025, and this is the first Wednesday of the month, which means it's HR Lunch Bunch. So, for those of you who might be new, we meet the first Wednesday of every month, noontime for an hour. Sometimes it goes a little bit longer because people like to network, and this is an opportunity for networking. This is an opportunity for us to share our knowledge and expertise in a particular area. Also, kind of like what's worked for you, what's not worked for you. Do you have questions of other people in terms of what they've experienced on any given topic? And today's topic is intended to be around employees' transitions and maybe thinking about those, what we're doing inside our organization, and are we doing things well? What do we consider transitions, both inside, outside, kind of the organization as a whole? So, again, if you're not familiar with me, my name is Deborah Jeffries. I serve as the Vice President of HR Answers. I've been here a long time and I've been doing this a long time. HR Lunch Bunch has been about 20 years in the making, and I love it. And I'm glad that we have such an interest in ongoing and in that regards. So, again, if you like to have your cameras up and chat with me, great. If not, that's okay too. The chat box is open as an opportunity, but this really is intended to be a discussion of sharing and interest with each other. So let's go ahead and start our conversation around employees' transitions and maybe have a little fun too. So, first question. When you hear the phrase employee transition, like what's the first thing that comes to mind? When you saw the blurb, when you saw the program title, it kind of it's a broad phrase. I think it can have some rich meaning. What were you thinking? What was going on for you?
I was thinking of more of the negative, so
Oh,
maybe they weren't succeeding in the current role, and we have a maybe better seat for them at the company, and so transitioning that conversation, transitioning that employee, and then, of course, transitioning the team. So I think my first thought was, I feel like it's a little bit easier in the beginning when it's a positive, but when it's a negative, it's more difficult.
gotcha, gotcha. How many can relate to what Joy is sharing with you all? You can use the emoji buttons if you want. You can chime in the chat box. That also lets me know you're still alive out there. Okay, thanks, Kim. Wendy, like it. Lindsay, perfect. What else comes to mind for you when you're thinking about this?
I think another thing that came to mind was employee transitions during restructures or reorganizations.
Yes. Yes, yes. And that even might even go a little broad when we have like mergers or acquisitions, or we sell off a piece of the operation or a property where maybe we're downsizing or something along those lines too, where there are transitions and changes afoot with the organization and how it might impact employees in that regards. So yeah, I like it, Lisa. Thank you. And I mean, bonus question here. How many of you like change? Are you a change agent? You're a catalyst for it? Do I have a bunch of people who are like, let's go? Okay, Sarah says yes, loves it.
I was going to say, talking about change is, how to get the message across and make sure that it is received across the same way to everyone. This is why we're doing it, so that everyone understands why the change is happening.
Yes, and I think that was a key word. Why?
Mhm.
Doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to like it or agree with it. And I think that's where a lot of just even person to person communication, let alone departments, organizational, across the board, are we all hearing the same message? Right? We'll sometimes hear what we want to hear, how it is germane to me, how it impacts my job or my department. I'm not listening to the whole thing, What's the get? What's the benefit to the change? Um, Short term, long term, because there might be some short term discomfort. Uh, in the grand scheme of those things, big picture, it's going to benefit all of us. More of us are going to be able to keep our jobs, whatever that looks like, right? So being able to be thoughtful about some of that. And I'm looking in the chat box where it's like, you know, it's more for a lot of us, it's more work to find those replacement individuals, regardless of what might be going on if it's a transition in that regards, right? And depending on the kind of change, it might be how much we might be embracing it or not, right? Um, and I think for a lot of things, change can be good. It's the adjustment period. And in some respects, when it comes to change, being able to, and I don't know that some of this might be culture driven, but how we afford or allow the opportunity for people to grieve the thing that we've lost or that's going away. And and if we can have, and this is maybe sound a little hokey to some of you, but if we can truly have a some kind of ceremony, some kind of acknowledgement, some kind of words around, because for the people who are struggling with that, whatever that might be, because sometimes we're just moving on and it's moving quickly, that it's like we're not honoring that. And if that was something that people put their blood, sweat, and tears in, maybe it was a program or a department or a something, a location, um, a division, a product, and then it's gone. We're not doing that anymore. We're not servicing. That program has disappeared. Maybe it's funding driven, maybe it's something else. So I think it's important for us to think about what that means to people on the other end. Because when I think about an employee transition, I think it can be any movement of a role in or out of the organization. So it's in that respects, it's very broad, but we can be talking about lateral moves, we can be talking about promotions, right? We can talk about people who are resigning, let alone retirements. So all the things that you guys were talking about, I don't think these have to necessarily be negatives. They're just different, right? And they might require different thought processes, different responsibilities, maybe different authority, people having to think differently, do differently, be someplace differently. So this can even be reassignments. This can be I took a leave of absence and now I'm coming back. So I want you to think about that too. There's an element here of people being gone for a period of time. They come back. That's a transition because maybe we have new policies, new procedures, new equipment, new new software, new whatever, and they're going to have to get up to speed. How many of you said goodbye to somebody as an employee for whatever reason and they've come back? Not a leave of absence, but they've come back. They're a boomerang employee. Well, we've got to get them on one hand, they know stuff, but what has changed? 6 months, a year ago? We have to reboard them in that respects. So being able to kind of think about that onboarding is a transition, bringing in new employees, that transition inside a department, or depending on the organization, the role that person is taking on, the cultural kinds of things, engagement with them, again, saying goodbye to employees, the offboarding, whether it was voluntary or involuntary, right? Maybe we have exit interviews or going through all those final steps. Those are transitioning. Who's doing all of those? Is it the same person at every location? Is that making some adjustments? Right? When we've got promotions or lateral moves or someone leaves unexpectedly, and that could be they left or it's a short-term duration kind of scenario, and we've got people who are stepping in or covering for people. That's a transition, right? Let alone some kind of restructuring for any normal of reasons, right? Return to work kinds of things, or succession planning within people moving up. They haven't left, they've just moved to a different department or maybe promoted from within. All of these things are transitions in some fashion or another. So, right? I think it's important for us to be thinking about the broad scope of that. And it isn't just an HR thing that might reside heavily with you, but what's everybody else thinking or doing or assuming? Who's taking care of what? And that can get us into trouble, I think. I mean, you guys tell me. So, any movement across the employee life cycle, right? Beginning, middle, end, and anything that's going to require some guidance or structure or support in some fashion is kind of what I'm thinking. And some of those are a little bit more risky than others. Some have more opportunities than others. So, yes, no, maybe. Joy says we rehire all the time. Yeah. What do you guys think? You think am I with that? Am I missing some things?
It looked like you covered it to me. All the
Well,
different changes. And I think even like there's personal changes, like you can imagine someone going through a divorce or getting married or having a
yeah,
baby or, unfortunately since COVID, we've had a lot of like suicides, in our work families that
yeah.
those really are transitions for people, right?
I think that's a wonder. I didn't even go there. I didn't
Yeah.
even go there. But you're right, absolutely. Because I think when those things happen, it really causes people to think about what's important in their life. And now let's talk about the personal why.
Mhm.
Why am I doing this? Why does it matter? Does it matter? Do I want to keep doing these kinds of things? And now, before we started our program, we were talking a little bit about boundaries. Now, what are people's boundaries? Now, I really do need to make sure that I'm there for my family doing certain kinds of things, or things are different now, or I've got to make personal adjustments because of X, Y, or Z, right? So I think that's, I want to say lovely, and that's not probably the right word for the giving the examples that you, I think that's a great example of expanding our definition.
It feels like knows about all of these things, right? We know about the work side and the personal side, and that's why we are like kind of pivotal in all of that with the employee life cycle.
Mhm, mhm. And let's face it, there are probably times, and I'm guessing that some of you have encountered this, where you have an employee who's gone through something that they haven't really been an open book about, and we don't find out about it until kind of down the road when it starts popping up its ugly head because the absences are starting to take place. Or maybe there's been a demeanor change or something in their behavior has changed. And we're like, this isn't them. This is not how they normally are. Something has changed. What's going on? And and being able to have our managers and supervisors pay attention to the changes, right? Because I don't think there's anything as normal anymore. It's normal for an individual. And they really need to be noticing those changes so that we can help guide them and have them kind of pay attention to that as potential, what I call like a red flag. Something's going on, and could that become a something else for us that we then need to deal with? And can we get on the front side and be proactive in that regards? And based on that, when we think about um, handling something, if somebody leaves, we've got the everybody else that's left behind, because it's sure someone got terminated, but it's the everybody else that's left to clean up or fill in. Layoffs, it's the guilt, that the survivor guilt, the people who are staying, right? It's the leave of absence, and it's the reboarding of the people who come back. And what does that look like or mean? Because we just assume they'll know. They've worked here. They get it. We forget, what are the things that is anybody tracking the changes to the handbook that we made? Or we've got some new protocols because of new equipment or new systems, or we've grown and these things have happened. So whatever it is, we need to think about those kinds of things. We don't always think about them because we've just been doing or moving through them, we've got to we've got to do that too. Okay, so I got some questions for you. Two now and maybe some later. So, what type of transitions have you encountered most often in the workplace? And like, how were they handled? And what worked and what didn't? I'm all ears.
So unfortunately, we had a reduction earlier in the year. And so that was it was again, it goes back to that communication that, that I had said earlier, is making sure that this is the reason that, that we did this reduction, that hopefully you kind of calm everyone and say, we don't see the need to go any further. We had to do this for business reasons, things like that. Of course, you still have the people that are very uneasy because they're like, when is the next shoe going to drop?
Exactly.
So, working with the leadership team, not just with the folks that were affected, the departments that were affected, but across the company, or the location, that, it's not the beginning of a closure. It's just something that we had to do for a financial stability reason at this point. And, just made sure that statement, the information was conveyed across the board.
Yeah. And I think that one of the things that you're bringing up is a level of trust, right?
Yeah.
When they're waiting for the other quote shoe to drop, is what are we as an organization doing? How are we doing it to build trust with our employees via across the board or
Yeah.
via our departments, our managers, supervisors with our employees? Because then when we are communicating or educating in some fashion or another, do they trust that? Is
Yeah.
that the whole story? Because if they don't, then what is it we're not doing to get that, ensure that in some fashion?
Yeah.
So, Chris, do I
And,
see
and,
your, oh, go
and we
ahead.
made sure that the communication was done right as it happened so that there was no questions going forward.
Nice. Nice. Chris, do I see your hand is up?
Yeah, yeah. In our organization, we're really spread out in, really 6 to 10 different locations, and we rarely ever get together all in one place. And so our information is shared mostly through emails or video conferencing. Occasionally, part of the group will get together in a location, but it's mostly email and video chat. But there are many role changes frequently, and we welcome new people, and we do have farewell parties,
Hmm.
and farewell send-offs, that kind of a thing. But I just assumed that was all pretty typical.
I think timing is one of those like check boxes. Like, how soon are we doing things? How comprehensive? Is email the only way we're doing it? Are people reading the emails? Are they reading all of the email? When they talk, are they filling in gaps? Because there are some. And when people fill in gaps, don't fill it in with positive information. It tends to be negative. And so then the answer is nope, that's not good. Is email, I mean, there are lots of channels of communication. Is that the best one? Should we send out emails? Should we text message? Should we put something, should we use Slack? Should we send something to their home? depending on the type of change or decision or um, activity that's going on. Um, don't just say it once, say it multiple times to ensure that they got it. Um, there's always that thing called the adult telephone game where, you tell somebody and it works its way down. And is that really the message that people got? So are we ensuring that the message is being carried forward in a way that we want? So less telephone is good. We just want to make sure that people are actually hearing what when I do a lot of training around harassment and respectful workplace and communication and things like that. And when we talk about communication, my intent is to educate or to make you aware of something, or my intent was to be funny, or my intent, but it usually kind of resides here. So the key really is what's the impact it's having on people. If I said something and my intent was to be educational, but it sounded snarky or condescending, or um, they don't trust me. So even though it was all the truth, they're questioning everything I said because I don't have their trust. So the impact of that is, yeah, we don't believe her. So being able to be thoughtful about then what questions do you have? We want to reserve time for questions as opposed to, and that's all the time we have. So the meeting's over and nobody gets to ask any questions. That can feel or sound suspicious to some. So being able to think about, you know, what are the barriers to our announcement or this version or whatever, and kind of run it through its paces. Because I think, your point is a good one. Doesn't everybody do this? I would tell you honestly, no. And having worked with clients over the years of all different sizes, the answer is no, they don't. Sometimes they share as much information as they think they need to or that employees need to hear at this time. I personally have a thought process of I'd rather have you have more than less. I believe in transparency, but that's my approach, right? What about somebody else? Most often, how handled, what worked, what didn't work. We'd, we'd like to learn lessons from you so we don't step in it.
I work for a pretty spread out company as well. There's about 400 employees in about 20 different states. And so we do like monthly um, high level management meetings. And so that's where I do a lot of my HR reporting of promotions and terminations. So we kind of have an idea that we provide that information at the top level, and then our expectation is that those top level managers then have team meetings and branch meetings. And so we do a lot of training around what that should look like. Because I mean, I'm probably hiring 5 to 10 people a week and letting go maybe half that. So if I was sending that out to the whole company at all times, they'd just be inundated with those kind of memorandums. So we are more targeted, like at the location that person's hired, they get announced that there. But we don't send it out to like the whole organization. But I do think we still struggle with when people leave the organization. There's always some surprises, or if you have someone unexpectedly pass away, and someone maybe have known them for a long time, but you don't know there's that connection. I feel like that's where I could use some more help on like how to communicate those terminations. Retirements are super easy because we can celebrate them, but anything else is harder.
Right. And I think that's a really great question. And I would encourage people to kind of chime in the chat box. What are you doing? What have you seen done or heard? What might you recommend? Because I also wonder, because I really like your point about there might have been a relationship or a connection that you have no idea about, right? They've worked together, and maybe it was kind of even previously, but they stayed connected, right? They stay in communication. And how would you know? You wouldn't necessarily know, and they would care that there was a transition with somebody or that someone had passed away or something along those lines. So I wonder whether or not there's any merit or benefit to reaching out to your employees and asking them, we as an organization realize that these things can be extremely important to you, and we want to be able to honor you and be able to communicate with you. What would you like or to see, or how would you think would work best given our multi-location X number of employees? Because 420 locations, 400 employees, 20 locations, that's a lot, right? What would make sense and being in keeping with the culture of the organization, and see what they might suggest to you,
Great
because
idea.
maybe
Mhm.
something even kind of employee driven, if we had a committee. And I want to be sensitive about information and information sharing and such, but I just wonder whether or not that might be something that could be a little bit more driven by them in that regards, or at least them providing you with some direction. And I'm curious if anybody would have some other input. What are you doing, or what have you seen or heard? Anything that you might weigh in for Joy in that regards? All right, well, you think on it, and you know that you can do a private chat message to Joy just as well as you can to everybody else. So feel free to do that. How about our next question? We've talked about communicating information out. How does your organization typically communicate changes, right? Are employees informed clearly in a timely manner, or is this an area for improvement? How are you, what tools, what process? Do you even have policies around any of this? Do we leave it up to managers and supervisors? And how good are they? Okay, I see some things coming in the chat box, I guess. Um, so memorandums of changes. Um, if it's not a major change, then we do it in an employee meeting. No policies. HR is pretty good about doing this. Sometimes units are good, sometimes not. Sometimes people don't know about it until it's too late, right? And that's the kicker. And what's the definition of too late? What did we miss? Or who missed what when, right?
Yeah, for example, last October, we're self-insured in all of our workers' comp, medical, pretty much everything, auto liability. And last October, they changed third-party carriers from Safe in Oregon, which we all use, to a completely different carrier. And I found out like October 15th. So that was really tough. I mean, we had to change the way we paid our people who were going out on workers' comp. We had to change what my managers had to do. And I mean, for them to tell me 15 days after they signed a contract, that was a problem because now I'm the backpedaling and, trying to to get it in front of it. But then if we've changed HRIS systems, so we are, spending 3 months going through emails and having meetings and having training. So when we know about it, it seems to work really well. But when they surprise us, it's not the same thing.
Right. Well, and I'm a believer that people do better when they're in the know. Again, they may not like it, they may not agree with it, but they then can quote deal with it or work with it or start to adjust to it. And I think that, my question to you all earlier about how much do you like change? Are you up for it or not? So then go and take that back to your manager group. Which group, which individuals are good at taking on the change. They're good, adjusting with the flow, going with the flow, adaptability, flexibility. And who's a little bit more resistant or more reserved or kind of shuts down or something along those lines. Now let's take that to the employee level. Now, depending on the size of your organization, you might not really know that, but you can anticipate that we have people like that. So being able to let people know, I remember one hospital that I worked with over at the coast, Southern Oregon, they were going to be making a humongous change. And so I did a little bit of work with them around that, and one of the things that was happening is that the conversation, um, they were really focusing on their level of leadership, but it's like, okay, now take it to the employee level. Who's going to be struggling? So let's let them know now that this is going to be happening months in advance, because get used to the idea, and how might that impact their job? And how can they start making some adjustments now, even though it's not happening, to be thinking about their work a little differently, start prepping a little bit here, slow baby steps, so that when the time comes and they're going to start getting enrolled in training, because it was a software component, and then they're going to start doing it. So it was this kind of slow roll up to it, because they knew that there was going to be some resistance, some educational learning that was going to need to take place. So some things we don't have time. It's like, whoa, okay, we're there. And other times we can do that. So knowing your people is an important factor. Knowing yourself is an important piece of that as well, if and when we can. So thinking about those kinds of things, getting people, and that's why I have lots of soapboxes. If you don't know me very well, I have lots of soapboxes. Managers and supervisors need to know their employee base. Like, what motivates them? Well, how do they learn best? What are their struggle points? And this would be one of those kinds of things, right? Because then we can help them over those adjustment periods. Because when we ask the question, like, why does all this matter with employee transitions? We know they happen. So we might now be thinking about them slightly differently because we're having this conversation. Productivity, morale, our team dynamics, when those take a hit, that hits the bottom line, right? It impacts the work that we're doing. When we have these things poorly handled in some fashion or another, whether it's the communication, it can cause confusion, then people don't know where they're going, what direction, then sensitivities are heightened. With that lost time, then again, we're talking about dollars. When we're talking about having transitions of people, when if it's a layoff and we're having more challenges, that could result in another round that we didn't anticipate. So being able to think about these as kind of like a subway going from stop to stop to stop, all of these things are on the big line, the red line, the blue line. We've got things to think about, not just short term, medium term, but long term down the road. And being able to say, are we planning? Are we thinking? Are we conversing about these things? Do we have things that are templates or plans, things we've done in the past? Have we learned from those to do differently? Can we create things to help it make it consistency? Is there a memo we want everybody to we're sending out and everybody has it? Is there something that we've written we want all managers to just read it, right? Not talking from the top of their head. We want everybody to just read it. When we're making a transition and we know we'll be making adjustments, or we'll know that we're hitting kind of a turning point, what are those milestones or those goalposts, so people can see and feel when they're seeing that change happen, when we know we're making progress because of the announcement that happened 6 months ago, 18 months ago, right? When we think about the fact that transitions will happen, now, who's going to be doing what? And making sure we're really clear about that. Because when it's vague, my mind can go a lot of different places. When it's clear and specific, when I understand how it impacts my job, my team, my unit, my department, my division, my location, I don't care if it's an outgoing employee, someone coming in, HR, the team, whatever that is, who's doing what, when, where, perhaps how. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. We got to be clear that this is the first pass through. This will go until it doesn't work anymore, whatever that looks like, because adjustments, refinements might need to be made. But even then, again, communicate. This isn't a forever. This is our first pass at this as a draft that we'll do this for the first 1 or 2 months and revisit something. We've got to put things like that in the conversation. We've got to put that in the document because what happens is it didn't quite go as planned. It's going longer than we thought. Maybe it's going faster than we thought. We're going to have to make a deeper cut. We're going to have more employees coming on board. We're going to merge two departments. Whatever it is, these transitions, adding staff, deleting staff, more people are on leaves of absence. When we had the whole thing with paid leave Oregon, a lot of us said we're going to have a whole lot more people who are taking leaves of absence. We're going to have to make some adjustments. Well, that's a transition of a different sort maybe than we might think, but a whole lot more people are going to be gone. Well, then we're going to have a whole lot more coverage or backup, cross training, because we're going to need people to be able to fill in. Maybe the use of temporaries. Are we going to need to staff up? What does that look like? So, all of that needs to be able to be communicated. This is our best guess at the time. We might need to make some adjustments. We'll keep you posted. We'll keep you posted by doing X, Y, or Z, and then do those things, right? So, asking even employees, how would you like us to communicate? I still remember, and this was a very, very long time ago. And when I say very long time ago, I'm not talking 5 years, I'm not talking 10 years. Beyond that, and because texting wasn't a thing really back then. Some of you will remember. Remember when texting first came out and you had to click the button 3 times to get that letter and 2 times to get that letter? How many remember? Give me an emoji. That it's not like it is now where you just click the letters, right? You had to like really work to send that message. Thank you, Chris and Kim. I was like, does anybody remember these days? Oh, I'm the only one, right? So she would call her employees. They wouldn't pick up the phone. And I'm like, what do you mean they don't pick up the phone? She goes, I'm calling my employees and they don't pick up. I'm like, and you've had a conversation? Because to me, it's conversation time because you be the supervisor and you need to get in touch with them and you need them to be here, there, or doing X, Y, and Z. And if they aren't picking up, that not be okay because that'd be part of the job. And she goes, yeah, they don't pick up. And she goes, but when I text them, they answer back right away. I'm like, you text them? That was very foreign to me way back when. I was like, wow, seriously. But she, for me, she was very cutting edge because that's what they wanted. That's what they would respond to. It was not her first choice. Definitely wasn't my first choice, but it worked. It worked for them. And that's all that mattered is communicating in a fashion they would respond to because that's what she needed because that's what their clients needed. So being able to communicate clearly, often in a fashion that people will read, listen, and pay attention to, right? What's changing and what's not changing. What does give people some reassurance back to where's the comfort in what isn't changing for people? I think also can be important. And let's face it, people have feelings. There's emotions involved and you might not know what emotions might all be expressed, then who on the team, the communications team, is going to be able to be a listener? Who's going to be able to resonate with the emotions? Do we need to have a micro training for our managers and supervisors about being a listener and being able to be emotionally intelligent, to be smart with other people's emotions and acknowledge them? Because this could be a big deal depending on what the transitions are. right? So being able to be thoughtful about that, especially with anything that's uncertainty. Because again, honestly and truly, we're hardwired for the negativity. That is how our brains are hardwired. And that not be good. That's why the why matters so much, right? So if we're talking about people departing, retirements, um, succession planning, and people are moving up and moving out or moving to a different location, or if you've got 20 states, it's possible someone's being relocated to a different state. How are we at being able to share the information when someone's gone? Leave of absence. If they're gone for 12 weeks, they're off work. We're not supposed to be contacting them going, do you know where we can find that file within our system? Because we're looking everywhere and we can't find it, even with search terms. We can't find it, right? So do we have standard operating procedures? Do we have um, little manuals that give us not only a written word, but also um, screen shares of what we need to do? Do we have project status updates? Do we have contact information? Do we have what does that look like, right? Um, Job shadowing. I was just with a program yesterday and there was two interns and I said to them, I want you to know you have a lot of knowledge and you have the opportunity to share all your observations. I would suggest you have a lot of power to be able to make recommendations about how things could be different in certain areas because you're looking at everything with fresh eyes. Everybody else has been in it and spinning. You're looking at going, well, what if this about this? Or what if we did that? Or can you tell me a little bit more about that? You you could make some suggestions before you go back to school. So what tools or resources, cheat sheets, what's available to be reviewed or adjusted before people leave, depart? I have one coaching client right now. She's got someone who's going to be moving on. They have this whole program. It's a very archaic program and hardly anybody knows how to use it. This person has like been the number one person using it. She's leaving. She's going to be retiring. They have no processes in place, no manual, no screen shares, no anything. It's been one-on-one training. They have two new people right now in the department, and she's training them one-on-one. I'm like, and we're documenting all of that because when she goes, who's going to teach the next new person, right? So transition has its yes or yes, let alone the team dynamics, right? Someone new coming on board, how's that adjustment? How are people welcoming that? Different work styles come into play, right? Even though they might have been involved in the hiring process. So if we have, again, the loss of a colleague, and the loss doesn't mean death, it's just departure in general. So, how do we help some of that? So, more questions for you. Have you had resistance to change when it comes to a role or a team kind of scenario? And if you've had some resistance, what strategies have you put in place? What's worked? Because we want to know and we want to take notes.
Definitely had resistance, and I think what I do first is really do, like you said, like an active listening session, right? Um, if it's a like department issue or well, here's a perfect example. We had an engineering team that had a manager for about 10 years, and the manager was very ineffective and not good at keeping people that were highly skilled, and instead our lower skilled engineers were very content on being on his team, probably because there weren't any expectations. So when we demoted the manager to a principal engineer and then started letting people go, so the team kind of went down from like 10 engineers to like 5 within about 6 months. So pretty quickly, yeah, major changes. And some of our engineers had been with us for like upward of 15 years. And then the department really kind of rose up and they were upset, right? And they really were asking good questions instead of just saying, hey, we're not going to talk to you about it. It's private, it's none of your business. We did call in all hands for that department. I was there. The new engineering manager, we hired a director of engineering. We did not have that position prior. And we really sat down and let them tell us, what they were thinking, how they were feeling, how the approach was looking. And we're a family owned company, even though we're quite big. So, we have some really great values that we want to continue. And I think giving them that voice, and then we had another fire to do, and I knew it was coming. So I knew it would then create some more disruption. But because of their voice, we actually approached the fire a little differently and based on their suggestions. And I think that really helped the team to feel like they not only had a voice, they were heard, but then we made some shift changes, even though we didn't stop the fire. We still did that, but we did it in a way that they felt, I think, was more respectful.
Absolutely. I what I like out of that is that um, you heard them, and when when we think about really demonstrating that people have value, that the input that they're offering you has value, is that they've been heard.
Yeah,
And I think that is so important. And it's not, let's face it, it's not easy to kind of confront reality of
right.
what's going on and what what kind of what got us here, whatever here is for any of us, right? We're here now. How did we get here? And it's not to berate anything because the past is the past. We don't want to keep doing it, right? You keep doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results. We all know what that's come to be known as. So the answer is, so what are we going to start doing differently? Or how are we handling things? And that's not only as a team, but as an individual.
I think the other thing that really helped is not only listening to them, but telling them as much as we could. So, in each instance of the fire, they would be like, "Well, did you give him an opportunity?" And I could say, confidently that I had 4, meetings within the last 3 months with this person discussing our issue. Obviously, I couldn't tell him what the issue was or anything, but like they're like, "Oh, 4 meetings?" Like now they got some trust and confidence in us because it wasn't like, the new manager came in and then verified this person wasn't a good fit and then we just, went with it and let the person go. No, we met with them 4 times. Now, they're talking to this person because they've been friends for 15 years and maybe they didn't tell him that. But then they could ask a good question and it will be much harder for the person to lie, right? So I think being as transparent as possible was helpful too. And we did that. I think that's what you mentioned before.
Absolutely. And let's, in all sincerity, let's face it, people don't stay someplace for forever. I mean, it's that's not, we
Yes.
would like people to stay longer than a year, maybe
Yes.
even 3 years. I've been with HR Answers for over 30 years. That's not the
It's rare.
norm, right? So, and believe me, I understand that and I get that. And I think my employer gets that too, right? But when you like what you do, right, and you get a chance to grow and continue to contribute and things like that, right? I think that, so what are we looking for? What does that mean? And the word that I often use when I work with people around hiring and coaching employees and things like that is alignment. So I try and avoid, and just only because you shared the word, um, fit, because it is something from an attorney standpoint that they could say discrimination. So I always looking for, is this person in an alignment with us, our core values as a department, where we're going? Um, Are they in alignment with the staff, with the supervisor? And let's face it, as time goes by, the life cycle of an employee, my life in general, where I'm going, what I'm doing, what's happening, I might not continue to be in alignment with the organization. And instead of seeing that as a negative, the answer is we do grow and change. What we need to do is be honest about the fact that we are changing. And people are like, well, it's a bad thing. It isn't. What's a bad thing is that we're not talking about it. We're not actually asking, I do want to grow in these areas. Is that an opportunity? If you're a flat organization, there probably isn't a lot of upward mobility. Now, there might be lateral opportunities, and I can go to 19 other locations, but I don't have, there's only three kinds of positions in this organization. Well, I need to think about that when I'm taking the position. I need to think about that futuristically. I mean, there's just all kinds of things, but that's also a conversation with managers and supervisors to be thinking about that. And are we having some of the right conversations as soon as we need to? Are we also outlining for people what the consequences of not making adjustments, what comes next? Because having four conversations, we're giving people opportunities. They make choices. Then we follow through on their choices, right? And educating all employees about that. Because again, people will sometimes hear what they want to hear and they take sides. They've been known to take sides, but I think oftentimes employees can see through some of the BS. People are just always so like, we can't talk about that because that's confidential. It's like, well, the reasoning behind it, yes. But I like what you said. I can confidently say, this is what we did without crossing a boundary line of information, right? Absolutely. Because let's face it, HR is in the mix, right? How are we handling things? How are we communicating things? Any handoff processes that we have, our ability to maintain professionalism. We might not even agree with the changes. We might be struggling with some of the decisions, not only professionally, potentially, I've had situations with HR where things have been a moral or ethical dilemma, and then they've had to make some decisions around that, let alone empathetically about what's going on. But that's for any transition, internal, external, whether they're remaining employees or exiting employees. So again, we have compassion fatigue can be taking place for us as HR professionals, let alone how are we helping finding avenues for support. Because if you have an employee assistance plan like Canopy, which is one that I highly recommend to folks, when you think about that being a resource for transition. So for those of you who have had someone um, who has passed away, whether by their own hand or another scenario, major accidents, sudden changes within the organization, an EAP can be a wonderful resource for you. And if you don't have a current employee assistance plan, you can utilize them as a one-off. And Canopy is an example of an organization who will work with you on something like that. So being able to be thoughtful about other resources, maybe even through your own health medical benefits, there is something built in there with EAP assistance for employees who are the quote survivors of layoffs or changes or adjustments or things like that. And so always remind them if you're not thinking about that, that can be a really good resource for you as an extension of the HR department, as an extension of managers and supervisors, because managers and supervisors, their expertise is the job. And remember, their expertise is the job, not all those other things. And we don't want them to cross that boundary line. So if they can be remembering that, okay? So I also gave you some other questions here that we could use, but I'm also sensitive to time. So remember, we also have, as I mentioned earlier, do you have checklists? Are you using them? Are you giving them to people? What communication tools do you already have? If you guys have something and you're willing to share it with everybody else, I encourage you to put notes in the chat box about I've got a tool or I'd be willing to share, or if you send it to me, I can send it out as a follow-up after the program to everybody. I'm happy to do that. Make sure if you're providing um, educational programming to folks that you document that you're doing those things to kind of keep track of what's being provided. Again, new people coming on board, what programming have you provided to everybody else, but then they haven't had it, so that we can hold everybody to the same standards or get them up to speed in some fashion or another. So um, you could ask your employees, take some of these questions back. What's a transition they've experienced that went well or didn't go well, and why? What's one change that they could implement? What's something that they would like to see? Back to the example of having a conversation with an employee, how employees, the department, and what could we change in terms of how we handle something, and what would be the benefit to that, right? So I think that one of the things that is important, we always talk about human resources. Remember the employee experience, the human experience in whatever some of these transitions might be. Investing in our processes. Sometimes we say, I'll get to that. We'll kick it down the can a little later. I'll put it on the next, budget cycle, 2026, 2027. And it doesn't happen. And it doesn't happen. So being able to think about, can you carve out a little time? Can you make it a special project for somebody? Maybe an employee group in some fashion or another, because then you can take any of that, some of the additional questions for your use. Um, where are we seeing morale dips, or what steps would you take to reduce disruption for a team? Anything, so that you can get back to the question I always leave us with is, based on the conversation or information shared, was there a nugget there that there's something you can start working on? Who will you share the information with? Is there anything you'll start doing differently? Maybe even something stop doing? It's up to you. It's up to you. So, if there are questions, now's a really good time for us to share those with each other. And again, I always hang out, and I'm the last one in the room. But just so you know what's coming down the pike for the rest of this year, again on our first Wednesdays of the month. Next month, I'm going to have a guest with me, Whitney, and she's going to talk about safe commuting options for all employees. She's big on saving the planet and saving some opportunities, and can we commute, and what might that look like for those of us that are outside greater Portland area, inside other states even, because sometimes we have folks that join us. We have a huge biking community in the Portland area and others. So then I'll be back with you on October 1st for Fostering Belonging. And then if you know Natalie Miller, she used to be with Lehigh Harrison, but she's now with Apprenti, and she's going to be talking about a program that they're running, but learning a little bit more about the non-traditional apprenticeship programs. This isn't about the trades necessarily, and there's even apprenticeship programs for HR. And I don't know that most people actually even know that, but she's going to tell us a little bit more about it. And then in December, we'll be talking about all of us that are HR departments of one. We'll talk a little bit more about how we can handle that and do it all by ourselves. So that's what's coming up for the rest of this year. And I welcome your suggestions for topics for 2026, because believe it or not, it's time to start thinking about that and kind of lining it up. And I would welcome your suggestions and input. Like, let me know, because this is about you. I try and come up with topics that I think are relevant, things that our clients are sharing with us. So please let me know. So, questions, observations, things that you thought of that might be helpful for each other to share. Now's a great time. Don't see anything in the chat box. I do see some thank yous. Hopefully, there was something that was helpful for you to take back to your teams today. Or again, if you're a department of one, there's really no team. You are, what is that, me, myself, and I? team? All right. Not hearing or seeing any questions. So I will officially end the recording. If people want to hang out and chat for a few minutes afterwards, I'm always up for that. So thank you for joining for August Lunch Bunch. I appreciate that. We're always happy to have you. And again, thank you very much.